That night, the snow swallowed the road, and my husband said the cabin was just dead equity. I poured tea, opened an old file, the occupancy clause he'd signed. In the morning, the judge would read it, and the one leaving in a blizzard might not be me. I fed the stove, the crack of sap in the wood sounding like old bones knocking on stormy days. Outside, wind scraped along the tin roof, turning the porch white and hiding the footpath down to the creek. Frozen solid winter in blue elk has a way of making everything look smaller. The teacup by the fire, the gloves drying on a chair back, even my voice when I have to say things I'd rather not dead equity, Roy said again, eyes stuck to his phone. He tapped the pine table he'd built back in '85, the same table he used to brag about at church. Solid as a vow. I looked at the worn groove where my knife always hits, where I've sliced onions for venison stew, where Ellie learned to cut pie at 13. Some proof of a life doesn't need a map. Your hand finds it by memory. I didn't argue. I set a chipped mug of tea in front of him and pulled a brown, yellowed file from the cupboard. The binder clip was cold against my fingers. I opened it under the kitchen light and let the faded ink show itself. The deed, a smudged notary stamp, and one plain line, neat as a ruler. No transfer, no mortgage, no sale contract, without the written consent of Mrs. Martha Lane. Next to it was Roy's signature, the pen stroke shakier on a winter day long ago. "Did you talk to Kara?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Kara's the agent down the mountain. The one who promised a quick close before hunting season. Roy nodded, barking at the air. "Cash buyers. We need capital moving. Taxes, roof, road. Keeping this place is a money pit." I pictured the road down to town buried halfway to the axles by morning. The county clerk, Travis, had told me on the phone, "You filed. Be ready. The judge will read carefully." That sounded like a handrail on an icy step. Small, but it let an older woman stand steady. Roy sipped and set his mug down too hard. The sound snapped like dry twigs. "I don't want to fight," he said, "but don't stand in my way. At our age, we have to be practical. Down the mountain is warmer. Here it's just snow and more snow." He didn't look at me when he said practical. I've lived long enough to know when someone talks only about profit, they forget to ask what keeps another person alive through a winter. I breathed in pine and black tea. I thought of Ellie, probably setting water to boil in her apartment in the city, telling me, "Lock up, Mom. This storm's big." I thought of Cal, who sides with his dad, texting me short, "Come stay with us." I pictured his hands shaking from cold and from guilt while trying to sound like a man who understands money. "I'm not blocking you," I said softly. "I'm keeping a promise." "What promise?" Roy frowned. I touched the notary line the way you touch a child's hot forehead, the one we already signed. The air dropped a notch. I knew that line would scrape his pride, but I also knew I don't have many winters left to play silent. Wind chopped through the spruces, rattling the wind chime made from old jar lids. I pulled out a chair and set the file open, like an unfrosted cake waiting on a plate. The deed copy lay on top. Underneath were printed emails, showings, private deposit, third-party terms. I set a box cutter beside them, not to frighten anyone, just to keep the pages from curling. But there it was, an old woman, a file, a hot stove, enough to say what mattered that night. "Did you put money down?" I asked. Roy's eyes darted. His answer felt like a draft slipping down my collar, quiet but chilling. "I know what I'm doing," he said. "Martha, nobody wants to watch you freeze to death up here." "No," I said, my voice catching on the last word. "Nobody wants to watch anyone freeze. Some folks just don't mind watching someone get hollowed out." Salt stung my eyes like blown snow. I didn't want to cry. I've done enough of that. For empty chairs, for my mother's coat still on the back door, for the wedding photo fogged by stew steam, I folded the file, leaving the edge of the deed showing like a bookmark. In the morning, I said, Judge Naomi Beck will read the occupancy clause. I filed for a temporary freeze on any transaction. We'll hear it clear as a bell. Roy let out a bark of a laugh, the sound men make when they've forgotten what used to bind them to a kitchen table. You drag the law into family business? Tonight, family and the law walk together, I said. I didn't add "and morals" because some words build walls. The window frost threw back our faces. Two old people across a stove and a yellowed file. Somewhere out on the county road, a plow clanked by. The sound of a town that knows how to clear a path after storms. I thought of the judge's voice, Ellie's eyes on the screen, the way Cal would stare at the floor to avoid his father's look. I also thought of the ending folks would chew over at church and the post office, that in a blizzard, the person stepping out the door might not be the old woman who tends this fire. I nudged the stove door shut. The flame drew in. Less wild, drink your tea, I said. Night's long, and I set the file straight on the table, like laying a warm cloth over an old bruise. Careful, slow, but final. At first light, I woke before the kettle. Wind shoved at the windows till the glass hummed. I laid kindling, then 2 longer splits so the fire wouldn't die. I do everything slow and sure now. One hand steadying, one hand feeding, no jerking, no fussing. Out on the road, the town plow growled forward and back, leaving a narrow stripe that glazed over to glass in minutes. My phone buzzed. Ellie, Mom, I'm driving up. Roads are bad. I've got the notarized copies and Travis's note. Don't worry. I typed back a small thing. Be careful. I wanted to add that I miss her, miss even the shampoo smell she carries in for goodbye hugs on the porch, but deleted it. Some missing is best saved for later. Roy scraped dresser drawers. He came out with his sweater pulled high, shadows under his eyes. Kara called, he said. Buyers will up the deposit to close before weekend. They just need assurance we're on board. He leaned on the word we like a splinter pressing my neck. I set his tea on the circle stain. We've made 1,000 times. The judge reads at 10, I said. Any showings or deposits can wait till then. I tried to make it gentle, but the grit in my throat made it sound like I swallowed sawdust. He curled his lip. I know the law, but we need cash. This place is dead money in winter. I'm too old for another slip and fall. His eyes flicked to the wedding photo in the corner, the one that fogs whenever I simmer soup. At 9:45, Ellie came in, shaking off snow, cheeks stung red. She kissed my hair, smelling like cold and old car heat, and laid a stack of papers on the table. Everything on Travis's list, she said, plus screenshots of Kara's emails. Warmth moved through my hands just from her nearness, and my heart eased, like a fire catching at last. At 10, the screen lit up. The wind outside seemed to hush. Judge Naomi Beck came on, direct eyes, even tone. Travis Cole filled another square in a flannel shirt, then Roy, then me, then Ellie. Kara appeared, bundled, lips painted the color of frost. Another box flickered. Derek Minton, the appraiser, eyes darting like a young deer catching smoke. Good morning, the judge said. Because of the storm, we're virtual. Mrs. Lane, Mr. Lane, I've read the file. Mrs. Lane seeks a temporary order to protect the occupancy clause and the requirement for her written consent on any transfer or encumbrance. Correct? I breathed, slow. Yes, Your Honor. I do not consent to sell, mortgage, or sign any contract of sale. Roy cut in. Your Honor, this is family business we're restructuring. I mean no harm. Winter is too hard up there. The judge nodded without comfort or scold. She opened a folder, thumbed to a page with a red clip. I'll read this verbatim, she said, and her voice was steady. No transfer, no mortgage, no sale contract. Without the written consent of Mrs. Martha Lane, all financial procedures involving this property require Mrs. Lane's signature. She looked up. Mr. Lane, is that your signature? Roy swallowed. It is, but... The wind shook his connection. His picture smeared, then cleared. He let the "but" go. Kara Whitlow, the judge turned. Did you take a private deposit before verifying consent under this clause? Kara pressed her lips. Your Honor, it was a good faith hold. Everything. The email screenshot reads, deposit private, fast track closing. Timestamp 9:14 p.m. last night, the judge said, level. And the words, no need to involve her until appraisal. What does that mean, Ms. Whitlow? The kitchen seemed stretched tight as a drum. I could hear the tiny ticks of sap in the fire. It was poor wording, Kara said, smaller. We didn't intend to go around her. The judge faced Derek. Mr. Minton, your appraisal says no occupancy or encumbrance. Yet the recorded deed has a clear occupancy clause explain. He licked his lips. Storm night smeared scan. I must have missed that page. Travis spoke softly. Your Honor, I sent the complete file to Mr. Minton, confirmed received at 5:32 p.m. the day before. I straightened my back and laid my cracked hand still, trying not to shake. Ellie nudged her knee against mine. A small, warming nudge. Mrs. Lane, the judge said, anything more? I held up the notarized copies, Kara's emails, and a signed receipt Roy had scribbled for her. I also played a clip from our neighbor, Mrs. Hazel, Roy and a young man removing our Lane sign and hanging a fake print for staging. The judge watched and nodded like she'd expected as much. The court issues a temporary order, she said, firm. All transactions are frozen for 14 days until a full hearing. Any deposits must be returned immediately. The appraisal firm will provide a written explanation within 3 days. Any bank considering a mortgage or HELOC must be notified of the occupancy clause and this order. Roy's mouth tightened at the corners. Your Honor, if I say I'm sorry, that means I'm guilty. I wanted my wife to have an easier life. I've paid with my back and knees. I wanted heat. His voice thinned. I chose a bad way. I know. What's bad here, the judge said, is not wanting warmth. It's forgetting who's kept the heat going all these years. She paused. Winter is hard. That doesn't grant permission to be unkind. The screen went dark. Only wind and the quiet breath of the stove remained. Ellie hugged me longer than usual, wet wool and cheap soap near my neck. You did so good, she whispered. So good, Mom. Roy didn't look at us. He went to the bedroom and the door clicked just hard enough to shake the lonely wind chime on the porch. By afternoon, the storm returned. Ellie and I shoveled the steps. Sweat ran down my back, even in the cold. Mrs. Hazel waved from her yard. Need more salt? She called. I smiled and shook my head. In a town like Blue Elk, a small question can hold a person in place. That evening, Cal called no video, just his voice caught in a narrow room. Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put my name on that LLC for Dad. I thought I was helping. He sniffed like the boy who skinned his knees and ran home. I'll tell Kara to pull everything. Roads were bad. I couldn't make the hearing. Don't be mad. Don't drive tonight, I said. Wait till morning. Eat supper. I can only keep my children now with lines that small. When I turned off the kitchen light, the fire was a low, steady orange. Roy's voice came from the bedroom door, low as a wooden bucket dragged across ice. Martha, tomorrow I'm going down the mountain. Couple nights at a motel. He paused. I'm not used to losing to the law. This isn't winning and losing, I said. It's recognizing a boundary. I didn't ask him to stay or soften it. Some winters, quiet has to speak for you. 2 days later, the snow thinned. The road showed dark, wet strips. cars filing a dirty thread through the valley. Ellie drove back to the city, promising to come up on the weekend I stayed, cleaning the shed, taping a drafty window with the roll I keep for north winds. My hands burned like salt on a scrape, but my chest felt lighter, Travis called, his voice like warm air off a library radiator. Mrs. Martha, the bank responded. They had a HELOC application from Mr. Roy based on a draft sale contract. With the court order, they've canceled review. I thanked him, listening to his keyboard clatter and thinking of young folks in this town learning to be steady in storms. Then Kara rang. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Lane, she said quickly. There's been a misunderstanding. The buyers love your place. We can do this outside court. I'll add money for the porch, new windows. You just need to sign consent. Ms. Whitlow, I cut in, voice quiet. Do you have a mother? She stalled, breath puffing in the line. Yes. If a house smells like her hair, like the stove those nights your head pounded, if you can feel her hand on the doorframe after church, would you call it dead equity? I waited. The line held like untracked snow. I'm just doing my job, she said, smaller. So am I said. I'm keeping my home. I hung up, not satisfied. Kara's just a link in a chain, but every link has a temperature. I made more tea, watched embers work inward through the wood, and thought how many years folks have named things wrong, calling duty a burden, longing a weakness, a home dead money. At noon, the mailman brought an envelope, notice of full hearing next week. The court also required Roy to produce 3 months of financial communications, including private deposits and any loans tied to the house. I set the letter down by my mother's faded handkerchief. I wasn't happy. Law never bandages what family cuts. That night, Cal emailed a scan of transfers. I sent money to buyers for Dad, he wrote. I asked for it back. I told Kara to stop contacting us. I typed back clumsy words. To thank you, sleep early. When the house is dark, older women hear more. Wind changing direction. A porch plank sighing. The door frame swelling, then easing. Those noises teach timing. Endurance has its hour. Silence has its hour. And the moment to speak, slow and tight-throated, has one too. Next morning, Mrs. Hazel came by with a tin of cinnamon cookies. Saw the county docket, she said. You all right? I poured tea and told the short version. She narrowed her eyes. I've got one more clip, from when Roy and that young fella took the lane sign, down for photos. I'll send it if you need it. I took her hand, thin as a twig, tough as fence wire. Thank you, I said, my voice softening like another log settling into flame. By afternoon, Roy texted one line. Sorry I made you feel small. I called the bank. I read it and set the phone down. Some apologies are designed to blow through like a dust devil. No snow left behind. I waited for the hearing. Hearing day came with thaw and puddles. I wore the blue-gray sweater Ellie found at a yard sale and my mother's hand-woven scarf. The courthouse is a red brick building by the post office, pitched roof, low chimney. Inside, wooden benches, the smell of sanitizer and wet boots. Roy sat 2 rows away, bruised looking under the eyes. Kara showed up polished. Derek carried an overstuffed case like a latecomer paying in paper. Travis nodded to me from the clerk's desk. Judge Beck took the bench. We stood, sat, the benches whispering across the floor like storm wind far off. We continue the Lane matter, she said, on the validity of the occupancy clause, transactions without consent, and any deceptive actions in appraisal or brokerage. The county's gray-templed attorney spoke cleanly. Clause is valid under county form. Transactions without consent are void. There's evidence of staging to hide the presence of a life occupant. Emails show intent to delay notice to the consent holder. Kara leaned into the mic. Your Honor, I was trying to get a good deal. I did not intend to violate Mrs. Lane's rights. You're not on criminal trial, the judge cut in, but this will be reported to your licensing board. An agent's job needs the same kind of hygiene a surgeon's hands need before touching a wound. Derek tried the weather, the printer, the junk folder. The judge let him talk, then lifted Travis's print out. Delivery confirmation at 5:32 p.m. Storm hit past midnight. How did you miss the occupancy page? He didn't answer. His silence was a clear puddle that breaks the minute you step on it. Then Roy. He stood gripping the bench back, nails gone white. Your Honor, if I say sorry, I'm saying I was wrong. I wanted my wife to have it easier. My back's shot, my knees. I wanted warmth. His voice cracked. I chose badly, I know. What was bad, the judge said, wasn't wanting warmth. It was forgetting who's kept it for decades. Her pen clicked once. Order. The occupancy clause stands. Any sale, deposit, or encumbrance without Mrs. Lane's written consent is void. Deposit is to be returned immediately. Appraisal is referred for review. Mr. Lane, the court recommends financial counseling and, if both sides agree, marital counseling. A protective boundary order is issued. Mr. Lane is not to coerce, harass, or host showings within 300 feet of the property. 6 months, renewable. Her pen tapped lightly. I felt my heart tap back and then slow. We stood. I rose slower. My mother's scarf slid. Ellie lifted it and tucked it around me, squeezing my shoulder like saying, done. On the courthouse steps, the sky spit light snow. Roy stepped out first and paused. He didn't look at me. I didn't call him. A small wind slipped between us. Cold, clarifying Kara went by, eyes averted. Derek hunched around his case. Travis came out and asked, gentle, want a printed copy of the order, Mrs. Martha? I nodded and tucked it in my bag beside Mrs. Hazel's cookies. Back home, I stood on the porch and looked at the creek. The ice was still there, but darker, as if a road was reappearing beneath it. My hand found the porch post, cold, smooth, a thin scratch where Roy once hung a brass bell. I thought I'd cry. I didn't. Just a quiet, neither triumph nor loss. The quiet of a cleared path, straight shovel lines, steps revealed, and the knowledge that tonight I'll walk them without fear of falling. That night I wrote a short note and left it on the table. Not for court, for me. Martha, winter roads aren't for speed. They teach you how to place each foot, firm, slow, willing to turn back if you must. A house is not dead money. It is a life. Winter wasn't done, but the town posted spring hiring for road crews. I called a carpenter to install a new handrail on the steps, patch the porch roof, replace the window seals, and lay a non-slip mat Roy used to call these pointless expenses. I paid from small savings, and with Ellie's help, she said, the safest investments are the ones that buy you peace. Court letters came steady. Deposit returned. Appraisal under review. Protective order in effect. I slid them into the yellowed file and let them go quiet in my mind. Roy rented a place down the mountain. Cal came up now and then with rice and cured meat. He didn't say much. He shoveled the steps, drank hot tea, and watched the fire. Once he left an envelope on the table, refunds from the buyers. Keep it, he said. I owe you a long apology, but I know you don't want words. You want boundaries. I touched his hair like I used to. Under the sweat and old coat, my little boy was still there. Kara emailed, no apology, just that she was voluntarily pausing brokerage in the county pending review. I read it and breathed. Mrs. Hazel brought a small cactus. This one handles cold, she said. I set it on the kitchen sill where the morning sun creeps in late. I poured tea and she told me her daughter might move closer. Her knees aren't what they were. I nodded, knowing older folks draw their maps around a stove, a step, and tasks that ask two good hands. One evening, my phone rang. Roy. I hesitated, then picked up. I started the financial counseling, he said. They asked, "Did you ask your wife?" I couldn't answer. It's been a long time since I asked you anything decent. I leaned into the counter. I wish you patience, I said. Every storm ends if you stand still a while and listen to it blow. He was quiet, then hung up. I watched the fire and added another log. Flame moved slow but sure. At month's end, Ellie drove up with the baby. The boy liked tapping the thin ice along the creek and laughing when it cracked like glass. "Don't go too far," I called. He nodded, and his bright eyes caught the snowy sparkle in the pines like a pinch of salt. That night, the three of us ate venison stew. The knife groove on the table was there, as always. I told my grandson how his mother, at 13, cut pie there and cried when she nicked her finger. "Mom cried?" he said, wide-eyed. Ellie laughed and nodded. I looked at them and felt the invisible ropes tying us across winters, over fissures we've patched, across paths we've cleared. When I wiped the table, my fingers brushed the old file. I didn't need to open it anymore. I know what's inside the way I know the taste of first snowflakes, the sound of wood that means the stove's truly warm. The law isn't a blanket, cold and rigid, but it's a milepost so you don't lose your way. The heat still comes from the stove and hands. Late, I opened the door to the porch. The new handrail shone pale in moonlight. I set my cracked palm on it and leaned. Solid, mountain wind brought pine, ice, and a faint sweet like leftover cinnamon. I pulled my coat close and smiled. Folks call a home dead equity. I don't argue anymore. I live here, simmer soup here, nap to the wind here, and every morning I step over this threshold with a good handrail, knowing I have never stood alone in a storm. Spring will come. The ice will run to threads. I'll plant mint below the kitchen window where the sun is late to rise. And if a day comes when I must say goodbye, I'll say it in the slow voice of someone who learned to walk winter roads. Sure, steady, and never turning away from the truth. Tonight I add another stick to the fire. The flame leaps once, then settles, wrapping the log like an old embrace. The wood creaks, not from pain, but from becoming warmth. I sit close, hands out. Heat spreads, enough to trust that tomorrow I'll open the door, fill my lungs, and step over that rail, slow but straight, into the rest of my life.